So good evening again. My name is Anthony Bonds. I am the Assistant Superintendent for the School District of Beloit, and it's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to MC tonight for such a great occasion. So thank you for this opportunity. We're going to get right into the program. So now for an official welcome, I would like to bring the Vice President of Academic Affairs for Beloit Blackhawk Technical College. That is Dr. Zahi Atala.
Thank you, Mr. Bonds. Good afternoon. As you heard, my name is Zahi Atala, and I'm the Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Blackhawk Technical College. And if you'd allow me, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for being here at our central campus for this great opportunity to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King and the profound impact that he's had on driving our nation's commitment toward freedom and human rights. And it's not just our nation, it's humanity. I grew up in the Middle East, where the things that he saw growing up, and many did, are a common occurrence every single day. I wish we had Martin Luther King. As an educator, it's wonderful to be part of today's celebration because it's filled with powerful messages, music, and artful expressions by students from the school districts of our community. Dr. King was uplifted by the energy, the passion, the humanity of his fellow citizens. And I think he would be proud of all of the students, the teachers, and the administrators coming together for today's event. Dr. King was not just a pastor, was not just a husband, was not just a father, was not just a theologian. He was a hero. He was a humanist. And he was an optimist in the face of everything ugly that many of us suffered and some still suffer today. Despite incredible economic, political, and social exclusion and discrimination, he still believed in the idea of America and had an audacious faith in the future of mankind. He did have a dream. He was an incredible man, needless to say. His work and message continue to be vital to today's America, even 5 decades after his being taken away from us, not just for this country, but to humanity as well. Before I turn things over to Roosevelt and Van Buren Elementary School choirs, please allow me to thank the organizations that helped make today's commemoration happen. The Diversity Action Team of Rock County, the YWCA of Rock County, United Auto Workers Local 95, the School District of Beloit, the School District of Janesville, the Beloit Public Library, and the American Association of University Women. It is an absolute honor to work with all of you in partnership to keep Dr. King's dream alive. Thank you all, and I wish you all a nice afternoon.
We are so excited to spread Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s message about freedom in our first selection. Roosevelt Singers is for 4th and 5th grade students, and today we're going to sing the song "The Road to Freedom" by Teresa Jennings.
Oh, freedom calls to me. Freedom calls to me.
Our second selection is a song called Free at Last. We got one more song. Van Buren singers are going to sing a song that they thought we had to include today, so we weren't planning on it, but we're going to. It's called Dream Your Dreams.
Great job. Let's give a round of applause for both of our schools. The next part of our program will be a spoken word. One of the things that I did as I prepared for tonight, I did a lot of homework on Harlem, better known as A Dream Deferred to Many, Langston Hughes' poem. And one of the things that, as I read it over and over and rehearsed and thought I was going to be able to recite it, then I find I have two young ladies here who's going to actually do it in spoken word. So I'm really excited about their performance and how they're going to share that poem with us in such a magical way. I want to introduce two outstanding young ladies tonight. They are former graduates of Beloit Memorial High School, class of 2017. We are so proud of them. Kaya McDowell attends Carroll College in Milwaukee, and Sydney Marshall attends UW Whitewater. So welcome them to the stage.
Hi, I'm Kaya McDowell.
And I'm Sydney Marshall.
Our poem today is called Undeferred.
What happens to a dream deferred? You ain't gonna be nothing. Wrong. You want me to be nothing, but I will be something. I'll be more than you'll ever be.
There's no money in that. They kept telling me that psychologists don't make anything, so I switched. But when did dreams have a budget?
That ain't gonna get you nowhere. You don't want me to do it, but you're doing the same thing. Just because we're on the same path, don't mean I won't take a different route.
Your life ends when a new one begins. Stop saying that. Don't treat me as if I'm incapable of doing what you can do because I have a child. You don't fit that dream.
You too big.
You too short.
You too dumb.
You too ugly.
You too dark.
We are not victims to the things that make us, that shape us. This mouth, this body, this being is an act of rebellion. You should aspire to be
A doctor.
a lawyer,
A football or basketball player.
a nurse,
A vet.
a firefighter,
A policeman.
a teacher.
Or married with a dog, 2 kids, and a white picket fence.
My dream should not be limited to societal terms.
No amount of negativity will make my dreams come crashing down.
As Hughes said, hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. With the support of my family and the help from my God,
I realized the weight of the world was not on my shoulders. No dream is too big.
no dreamer too small.
I will succeed. You will succeed. We will succeed in 2018.
Thank you.
Outstanding job, ladies. So while they're setting up for our next part of the night, just wanted to discuss a little bit and share a little bit about growing up. Think about this. We're talking about 50 years later. I'm 47 years old, born in 1970. Dr. King was assassinated in 68. As a child, it didn't resonate with me, clearly because I was a child. But as I, thought about tonight, and again, just preparing, starting to think about, okay, a dream deferred. Now in high school, I remember reading the poem. I remember as a child also seeing The Raisin in the Sun and Sidney Poitier's, exceptional performance. I remember those things. I also remember in college where fraternities and sororities would often take on a dream deferred for several events and as a theme for that event. But I also just started thinking about my life and started saying, okay, well, what happened to me during this time? I benefited from their efforts, the efforts of the greats, the activists, the unknown heroes, the heroes that we hear about all the time. We benefit. there's so many of us have benefited from their contributions and what they have done that I don't think people realize how serious it is and just how short of a time period has been to make the amount of changes that are taking place and they are continuing to take place. I remember that as a student in Milwaukee Public Schools, so it had to be late 70s. Milwaukee Public Schools started what was known as forced busing. I was a part of that. So from one side of town, my elementary school was not even a half a block away, but because Milwaukee wanted to desegregate schools, they were doing what is known as forced busing. So I had to get on the bus, travel about, I want to say, for me it felt like forever, so it probably was about 40 minutes, but it was on the south side of Milwaukee to a school called Trowbridge Elementary School. I hated that place. I detested. So again, here I am at 47, not really living what really happened during the civil rights, but yet there were things and vestiges of what happened during the civil rights that were still going on even in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. And so when I went, when the school bus pulled up to Trowbridge, one of the things that I vividly recall, there were people picketing. Actually, they were educators. They were parents, educators, all picketing, saying they didn't want us to come into their school. Really? I remember kids vividly saying they talked about my hair and that it was nappy. I remember teachers as we were walking into the school holding their nose, saying that we stunk. I remember this vividly. So much that I hated the place so much that I decided that I was going to do something about it. I was going to find a way to not attend that school. So I hid from the bus each and every day for weeks to avoid going to school. Think about this. I was just a child, 8, 9 years old, having to experience that. No child should have to experience that feeling. But I did. So that's how important this day is as we think about those 50 years and where we have come as a society with regards to rights for everyone, and obviously the tremendous amount of work, especially over the last couple of years, that we have to continue to work on and improve. There's a lot of work to be done in this country. We have not totally arrived. But as you can tell, many dreams have not been deferred, but far too many have. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carrie Wyatt from Craig High School, who is going to introduce our video, and then we're going to have our panel discussion with students, some amazing students.
Good afternoon. This year we decided that we would do something a little bit different, and since it's 50 years after Dr. King's assassination, we had the opportunity for students, our students, to interview 4 activists from the 60s who worked with, marched with, protested with Dr. King and Cesar Chavez from Rock County as well as throughout Wisconsin. And this is really their opportunity to share with you. It was really several hours of interviews. I want to give special thanks to Amma Kairimi, who has spent hours right before finals week finishing up this video. She has done an amazing job for us. And we have 6 young people at this table here that are going to have, after the video, after you hear what our activists said and the advice they gave, we're going to hear what our students think from their position as young adults, where we are and where we're going and what we can do. So I'm very pleased to introduce first the video, 50 Years, Keep Moving Forward, and then an amazing group of students from Beloit, Craig, and Parker. And I want to also thank my colleagues, Tasha Bell and Stephanie Gates, who did so much to help make this happen. Thank you.
Last night, do you think it's wise to continue the demonstrations?
We're going to exercise our constitutional right to picket and to protest. We have tried every means possible to bring fair housing legislation to the city of Milwaukee. And we're going to continue to march.
Can you guys tell us a bit about what you did in Milwaukee back in the 60s?
I was a voting rights volunteer in Alabama in 1965 with a group from Milwaukee, and when we came back, several of us joined the NAACP Youth Council because it was the most active organization in the city. We didn't begin day one walking from the north side to the south side. Actually, as we first started to work on housing issues, it was on the issue of lax enforcement of the building code. So that's how the Youth Council first got interested in housing, pushing for stronger enforcement of the building code. Then in December of 1966, a young African-American Marine veteran from Vietnam tried to rent a house on what was like 2 blocks beyond the dividing line on the north side between the black community and the white community. At that point, it was 27th Street. So he and his wife tried to rent a place on 29th and Burleigh. And after some hemming and hawing, the owner said to them, "I can't rent to you. What would my neighbors think?" They came to the Youth Council. Again, the Youth Council kind of had the reputation of being the go-to organization if you wanted some action, if you wanted to take steps to resolve a problem. And they came. That got the word out. There was no social media back in those days. You couldn't go on Facebook and say, "Join us." But when people saw us, they would come out and join, and that's how those early demonstrations began to get some momentum.
I have a different experience than what she just described to you. I came here, I originally was here when I was in the 4th grade. I was at St. Francis on 4th and Brown. As she adequately described, there was very little movement in a well-to-do or nice neighborhood for blacks because they were constrained to certain boundaries. I chose of my own accord about 4 to join the activities of the commandos and the youth council. And I became involved simply because I was coming home from work one evening and I had my radio on. And the guy that was on the radio was describing blow by blow the things that were happening there because they had arrested the marchers and how they were down at the courthouse. I thought about it when I got halfway down the steps. I said, what can I do to help? And that ignited the spirit within me to join that particular movement. And that's how I became involved. And that's my story of what I was doing in the 60s.
Feingold, what marches or marches did you do with Martin Luther King Jr.?
When I was still fairly young, students were going from the north to the south to be involved in civil rights and to work for Voting Rights Act rights and just against segregation. Then it happened that Martin Luther King chose to come north to try to confront racism in the north, and he chose Chicago. And it happened to be the same summer that the program I was on was in Chicago. I was assigned to the near west side of Chicago. And I was there for tenant union organizing to try to get tenants in these terrible buildings to get together and have some influence so that the landlords would have to keep up the buildings. And we did that all day long for that summer of 1966. And it was quite an experience just being in the buildings and, of course, meeting people that I hadn't met before, being from Janesville, Wisconsin, which many of you understand. So it was quite an experience doing that. But it happened at the same time that Martin Luther King was planning the marches into the white neighborhoods where blacks were not allowed to live. And in that one area of Chicago called Marquette Park on the south side, there was a march, and Martin Luther King was leading that march. And people were yelling and so on at us. I was not near King, I was further back. There were hundreds of people, for sure, in the march. And what happened, I found out a little later that somebody did throw a rock and hit Martin Luther King in the head. He was brought to his knees by it. There's pictures of it, actually. I saw one looking at it because of this the other day. And he got up and continued the march. They were going to a certain real estate office, as I understand. Some people made it there, some didn't.
The summer that I was a voting rights volunteer, it was a Southern Christian Leadership Conference project. And at the end of the project, at the end of the orientation in Atlanta, we were going to go have lunch at Reverend Abernathy's church. And to get us there, Martin Luther King came to show us the way. And so there were about 100 of us, maybe a few more. Some people had cars. Too many people for the sidewalk, so he walked into the street. And then he looked over his shoulder. I happened to be in the front of the line. This is not an official protest march. This was just going to lunch. He kept looking over his shoulder, and finally somebody said, "Martin, what's the matter with you? Why are you so jittery?" And he said, "Mrs. Abernathy has been cooking since 5 o'clock this morning. She thought there would be more people here. She's going to be really mad at me because she's going to have all this food and nobody to eat it." And then he looked up and he looked around and he saw people watching us, like, who are these people walking down the middle of the street? And he said, "Come on, y'all. Come on, Mrs. Abernathy cooked lunch for you. Come on, join us."
Wait a minute.
And by the time we got to Abernathy's church, there were enough people to eat all of Mrs. Abernathy's food. That was my Martin Luther King experience.
Well, my Martin Luther King story was I had the opportunity to speak with him a week or so before he passed on. He had called the rectory at St. Boniface, and I answered the phone, and he wanted to talk to Father Grappi, and they wanted to put a question before the youth council to come and join him in his efforts down in Memphis. He needed that, she needed that support. Unfortunately, that never happened before he was assassinated. As a result of that, the group that I told you that sang, we went down, we all went down. It was 8 buses of us. A lot of us, we went down to the services. And Abernathy had requested that since we were dressed in uniform alike and et cetera, we were scheduled to sing during the services. But Mahalia got sick, and it kind of held up things because her people, her band or her accompanist were all on there. So Abernathy asked us, would we serve as ushers for the ceremony in lieu of singing? And I do recall the group ushering during that process. I do recall as the procession came down and they pulled the body along, several of the commandos and youth councils would join, and a couple of them can put their hand on the wagon as it flowed by. So unfortunately, I never had a face-to-face meeting with Dr. King, but however, I'm glad that I was able to just be a part of anything connected with Dr. King.
How have you personally seen the racial tension change here in Rock County since the days of Martin Luther King?
Well, the main difference I see is that we have more of a minority community in Janesville. When I went to school here, there were 2 black families. Now, there is a significant minority African-American community in Janesville, and there's a significant Latino community, and there's a significant Asian community, and I may be missing some, who are considered minorities. So there's a lot of change in that way. I think that opportunity is still very limited for African-American people. In the big cities like Chicago, I'm sorry to say that the long-term effect of what we did not create change, because the big change is there's now a significant middle-class African-American community across the country.
And the NAACP had a statewide organization. So I know we went to Racine to support their movement for fair housing, and I'm pretty sure we went to Beloit, where there was also activity on this housing issue, because their African-American population was also growing, and they were facing the same kind of housing shortages.
Touch on that. It has been my experience, and this was after the youth council and the open housing in the 70s, to make acquaintance with the Reverend Pruitt, the late Reverend Pruitt, and I believe a gentleman named Walter Knight. I noticed the champions of Beloit. They had a bright halo in the Reverend Pruitt. He worked for social justice and human treatment, particularly as it targeted people who were incarcerated. And Reverend Pruitt was very active and did a lot from his seat from the church. And Walter Knight was active in the area of education and equal opportunity, employment. I worked a lot with Walter Knight. So those were people that I rubbed shoulders with that were heroes.
So how did you see the youth influence the movement? Like, what were the contributions to it?
This part of it, this building these humans became a real effort. You can't go out and protest and being thrown in jail if you want to build agencies like this. You have to stay focused in terms of, because these are grants. These are funds that you have to create performances for, and you have to hire people that know about grantsmanship and know about creating services, and you have to. It's a completely different ball of wax to focus on, going back to the building sustainable communities and being able to focus on responding to building, institutions like this that are going to be lasting for 50 years, that kind of thing, like United Migrant Opportunity Services, that kind of thing. So those are two different things that are related. Just like you train people to go out and march and to not respond, to be provoked when there's violence, you teach them to respond to when money is available, to be able to go out and help your community.
I certainly think that's a key point to whatever you're doing. Once you're aware of social justice issues, once you're aware of there are people not at this table who should be at this table, you're prepared to see where you can raise those questions, whatever it is you're doing, whether you have a government job or a corporate job, or job in a health agency or a nonprofit or a school. Just to back up a little bit, though, the Youth Council didn't so much continue to function as the Youth Council. By nature of being a youth organization, that means that people are going to reach a point at which they make life changes. You graduate from high school, maybe you go to college, maybe you get a job, maybe you go away somewhere, or you graduate from college and then you have to find employment somewhere. So it's hard for the same people to stay in the same contact like that. But the Youth Council was a friendship circle as well as a social justice organization to bear on subjects that make a difference in people's lives. So depending upon where people were heading, they did ask the question that Fred is talking about. How can I bring my social consciousness into whatever else I'm doing, whether it's the workplace or whether it's my social circle or whether it's my clubs?
Organizations that are going to last, you're always looking for people that are committed, that are intelligent, that are, and maybe even a little bit more or as intelligent as you are. And you have to be able to have that diversity of skills to be able to run agencies or to found agencies like these.
So one of our main focuses to talk about civil rights currently is the Dreams Deferred poem by Langston Hughes. And the first stanza of that poem is, "What do you do with dreams deferred?" And I want to know what your perspective is on the current status of like all your progress that has led up to what it is now. Do you feel like with the current political and social state of America, do you feel like we're regressing or just at a standstill, or do you see
to a certain
progress?
extent, we're at a standstill and regression in certain aspects. Like say, for instance, when you think about Selma, and you think about Martin Luther King, and you think about the two key national legislative acts, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. It was just jubilation in terms of those achievements, because we finally got the franchise. But now, what are we dealing with now? We're dealing with voter ID. In other words, restraints on restrictions on our ability to be able to vote, to exercise the franchise that we thought we had 50 years ago with the Voting Rights Act, but now with gerrymandering, with the redistricting, with the voter ID, restricting the hours that the polling places are available, that kind of thing.
So going off of what Alma asked, do you feel that right now, where we are in America, do you feel that there's more that needs to get done for things to happen? Or do you feel that there's nothing else that can happen?
No, there's a lot to be done. But I think, as far as the Latino community is concerned, like here in Milwaukee, at least we got a place to start. When we started, we didn't have humans. We didn't have a 16th Street clinic. We didn't have United Community Center, La Causa child care program. We didn't have I mentioned at UW Milwaukee, there were a dozen Latinos that could all sit around the table out of a population of 25,000. And now there's nearly 2,000 Latinos enrolled at UW. I mean, you would hope that most of those UWM students usually stay in the state of Wisconsin. So there's reason for hope. I mean, it is not, we have a base, we have something to start. You don't have to, start from where we started. You start from where we're at right now. And it's a long journey. You can't do it in one summer.
How did you maybe promote civil justice in the schools?
The classroom that I had a privilege to work in was in the TA assistance at UWM, and that's like a college setting. In the teaching aspects of it, I had experience in alternative schools with alternative kids that, alternative to corrections, and that's kind of a different kind of, you have to, really get in there with those students. And by and large, that was quite an experience, short-lived, but quite.
Well, I've been an educator.
She's an educator. This is the person you should have directed the question to.
Adult life.
Right.
And you may find this hard to believe. I'd be interested in your reaction. When I was a graduate student, I was near finishing my degree when UW Milwaukee had the first African American literature class that had been taught on the campus. Is that hard for you to believe? Because you read, I hope you read African American and Latino and all kinds of writers. So one of the first things that those of us who realized how narrow our literary background was. I was an English major, an English professor. One of the things we realized was how narrow that was. And so the first thing was, who else should be at this table? Not literally a table, but in the classroom, in the curriculum. And began largely to educate ourselves, reading more widely, reading more inclusively, and then got those writers into the curriculum. So if you're reading all that now, that's because people in the first African-American literature class in the English department at UWM was in about 1975. So from that point on, there was that kind of movement toward inclusivity. I think we still have a way to go, so that hasn't ended. I think a lot of educators began to alter their way of teaching. Instead of the teacher being the know-it-all and lecturing the whole time, and what the student's role was to take notes and learn what you took notes on and then say it back in an exam or something, began to adapt teaching methods that originated, as far as I know, in the Freedom Schools of Mississippi. That is, we all have something to offer, and so let's learn from each other and have much more participation in classes. Is that kind of the teaching style that you're experiencing? Good. And in the interchange, in the dialogue that takes place in the class, you get multiple opinions and you get multiple points of view, and then you can debate and ask for clarification and think critically, which are all skills that we need if we're going to critique what's going on outside of school as well.
In addition to the education system, what are some other changes that you've seen in Milwaukee, whether it's social or political, that have been going towards inclusivity?
Having been subjected to such unfair treatment from the naysayers and the people that we encountered on the marches, the way we were treated, it really groomed me in a way. It really disciplined me, and it prepared me for life. So as I transitioned from those marches or those protests, whatever you want to say, it made me a better person to be prepared to deal with what I had to deal with when I went back into the working world. So I could encounter the harsh harassment and still survive. So I just honed those skills. And whenever I got an opportunity, change. Let's talk about change. Change. And what is change? Change is taking something that you've acquired, a skill, and then taking it to the next level. And when you get an opportunity to protest is one thing, but to become into the very system and be a change agent is...
From the past, like during the marches, what poems or odes or music pieces can you still remember from them that really stood out?
At the rallies that we used to have, there wasn't a doggone rally that we had that there wasn't music. That the walkouts were on Cinco de Mayo, the 5th of May. The walkouts were on the 16 de Septiembre, Mexican Independence Day, or Puerto Rican. You know, in other words, we always mixed these political activities with song and with fiestas. Or we'd close off the street and have a block party after the school walkout. And, you know, and have not only speeches but music and song. And
one of the satisfying things of the movement of being in Chicago is that when we would have these marches and do things, we would stand around in a circle with local people and some of us who were there organizing and sing civil rights songs. And some of those are known. A lot of them came out directly out of the African American churches, a lot of the songs. That was a cultural, meaningful event, because I touched that, by singing those songs, and I learned that that's where it came from. It came from Africa in many ways, and certainly came through the period of slavery. So now I'm going to do a bad job of singing this verse from this song. Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. We sang that song and many others. That one always strikes me for some reason.
I can't sing, so I'm not going to do it. We shall not be moved.
Which side are you on, boy?
Yeah. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. There was also a tendency to take popular music and change the words and make it a freedom song. One that pops into my mind right now is there was the song, Never Met a Man Who Could Make Me Feel the Way That So-and-so Does. So the people who could sing in the youth council changed it to Never Met a Woman Who Could Make Me Feel the Way That Val does, talking about Mrs. Phillips, or Never Met a Man Who Could Make Me Feel the Way That Father Grumpy does. There was a song, I think, that was Sock It To Me, Sock It To Me,
Sock It To Me, Black Power.
Yeah, which changed to Sock It To Me, Black Power, yeah. Yeah, but music is great, isn't it? Yeah, it's so energizing, and it stays with you forever, the songs that are really meaningful to you.
Well, it has its place. The drum beat, the sound of the trumpet in the military marches, it stirs something up and it fuels the soldiers. Likened to the freedom song. When they sing those freedom songs and you're marching out there, you feel something. You want to become involved, It put people on one accord and they flow together. So they ignite something in you.
What can those who want to right the wrongs of social injustices do in this modern day compared to when Martin Luther King was alive?
Well, there's so much going on now. In a way, it's much more so than it was. Then it was the civil rights movement, followed by the anti-war movement in Vietnam, in the war in Vietnam. Now there's a complete list of items on the agenda of human rights that are challenged. But there are all kinds of issues that people are engaged in or can be engaged in to save people's rights, to have a humane. I like the word humane. We want to have a humane world. There's no reason why people cannot eventually get together and work together. There's not too many species in the world that go out fighting each other on a constant basis. Humans do it. And it's crazy, if you look in the long term, it's crazy. And so hopefully we will continue to try to get together and live together appropriately. There's a lot happening now, a lot you can be involved in, and other people are involved in, and I try to be somewhat involved in. So there are many opportunities to try to create the dream of the Pledge of Allegiance, freedom and justice for all.
Be patient with yourself in terms of these things. It's a long journey, and engage other students. You can't do these things by yourself. Talk about this these issues with fellow students. Get them engaged, and of course your parents, and know where the center of power is. Know where it is that you're going to be focusing your energy, so that you get the most effective results. So you don't waste your time spinning your wheels in that. But I said good luck.
In your work on this project, I think it's really such a good project, and keeps the spirit of the movement alive.
So I think we want to always move forward. We want to assess what steps we can take next to be better. Listen to other people when they share their experience with you. Accept what you can get out of it and take it and build on it and move forward.
At this time, this is an opportunity for, I'm going to ask some questions of the students and their experience that they had talking and interacting with the activists, but you also can ask questions. So if you have a question, are we going to hand those cards out now for individuals? If you have a question, can they just raise their hand and we'll come to you? So if you have a question also of the students, just, at any point in time, just raise your hand and we'll come out, and I will throw a question at the students. One of them will say they're going to take it on. If you're out in the audience, if you have a question, I'm then going to go out to the audience, and then we're just going to just keep pinging back and forth just to hear about their experience and some of the questions. So I'm going to start off with question number one for any one of the students who would like to take it. Have you experienced racism in your school or community? If so, give an example, and what did you do about it?
Hello, my name is Karen. I'm a junior at Beloit Memorial High School, and I have gone through racism at my school. So my sophomore year, I was in class, and it was during the controversial president election, and it was a day that President Trump was elected president. And a peer of mine came up to me and said, "So when are you going to Mexico? When are you leaving?" And I just looked at him and I said, "What?" And I felt like he was doing it as a joke, but it was not a joke to me. So therefore, I was not gonna let it go by. And I was like, first of all, I'm from the 414 Milwaukee. I was not born in Mexico, so I'm not going nowhere, and I'm gonna stay here, get my education, get my diploma, and go to college. And he just felt salty. He just stayed quiet. And I feel like what I did was right in that situation, because if I weren't to tell him what he did was wrong, he could have done it to other people around that looked just like me. So yeah, that was the time.
And that was Karen Soto from BMHS. Also, we have Michaela Ward from BMHS. Can you raise your hand? From Parker High School, we have Bria Robinson. It says, that's at Parker High School. Sorry about that. So Parker High School is Lex Schumacher. And you said Craig is with, Bria's with Craig. Bria, where are you, Bria? Thank you. Ken Forback. Alma Karimi. Any questions in the audience as we move forward? While we do that, we're going to go to our next question. How can you be an agent for change? How can you be an agent for change? Any student would like to take that on?
Hi. I guess just to be an agent for change is stand up for what you believe in and what you know is right and what's wrong. So if somebody's saying something and you know it's not right, then not just be silent. I know a couple weeks ago, we were walking from like, it was the end of the day and we're walking, and these two girls just casually threw out the N-word, and instead of saying something about it, I just let it go because I don't like confrontation, and it was at the end of the day, but I definitely like could have made a small change. Just would have turned around and be like, that's not okay. It's something serious and shouldn't be using the word.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Davis. My question is, your events as of recent, how has that changed your perspective as how you viewed racism before your present situation and as in your past?
For me, it was being able to be around people that have actually been through this personally, and they've lived through that for most of their lives, and then me being as young as I am, not having as much to experience with that, then hearing their perspective makes me realize that things were worse than what I could have thought they were, and that we've come a long way, but there's still so much more that we have to do in order to get to where we need to be.
In my opinion, when I was younger, I definitely knew what racism was. I knew that people were prejudiced to one another, that somebody could cross the other side of the street because they saw a person of a different skin color than them. But as I grew older, I learned the more harsher implications that it had, like systematic racism and how it's ingrained in our society, in our education system, in our political system. And I knew that it was something that was a lot bigger than just not liking someone.
It's a great segue to our next question. It is said race relations today are the same yet different. What lessons have you learned from the 60s activists, and how will you use those lessons to advance change today?
So what I've learned from the 60s activists is that there has been a lot of change, but there's still a lot to go. And while we're trying to go through the conversation in a society about what we need to change, we need to look at both sides, and we need to say, why are these people thinking this, and then how can we change that?
I have a question right here.
Hi, my name is Una Williams, and I'm a graduate of Beloit Memorial. And I want to know if you were ever the only one or a few of minority students in a classroom. Did you recognize it? And if so, how did you deal with it?
That's been every day of my life, every day. Yeah, that's something I've definitely realized at the beginning of this year. I'm always the only black person, more specifically black woman, especially in the workforce. Majority of my jobs, I'm the only black person. And yes, there's some Latinos, which makes it 10 times better. But it's like, I'd love another like black person there. So, and it's, yeah, so, yes, I am like the perfect example for that, sadly. And I would really love, like, if we encouraged more minorities to take more challenging classes, because they aren't that hard. You just have to put in work and listen, and it definitely would help out people like me to be a little bit more encouraged and not be the only one representing like people of color, because there are so many kids who have the capability to be in those classes. I don't think they're encouraged, or they're not encouraged to take them.
My name is Michaela Ward, as he said. I have been, the class that I was in, it was an accelerated English class, and I did feel targeted sometimes by the teacher, often asking me questions a lot. I was the only African-American girl in the class, as well as another African-American boy. And sometimes I did feel like, why is the teacher, asking me most of the questions? But yeah, I mean, like, sometimes I did wish that there was another African-American girl as well in the classroom. It probably would have made things a lot better, but.
In my elementary and the majority of my middle school experience, I was the only black person and one of very few, maybe only around 5 people of color in my whole school. So that was a very interesting experience for me transitioning from middle school to high school, where there was a lot more people of color. And from that, I was able to see that, unfortunately, in my middle school and elementary school years, I kind of fell into that, and I was kind of defensive or tried to hide my race or my ethnic background, and that was very unfortunate. But as I got into high school and I saw more diverse people, I was able to come out of that.
Sorry. So, like, going off of what Amma said, Amma's actually one of the first black females that I've been in class with for most of, like, a majority of my classes back in middle school. And then once I got to high school, I was the only freshman in a bunch of sophomore, junior classes, and I was the only African American female or anyone of any gender in any of my classes. So I was kind of just used to just being with my books and not having, like, other people around me, because everyone else was like, oh, she's someone else that doesn't look like us. You don't fit in with us like you should, so we're gonna, like, push you off to the side. So then I ended up being by myself more, and that's actually been a blessing and a curse, like, in both ways, because now I'm so determined to, like, get my degree and graduate high school and then make something of myself.
So, thanks for sharing. What do you think needs to be done to improve race relations in our schools, in our community, and in our country?
I personally feel there needs to be, like, more groups that are integrated, because, like, at our high schools, I don't know about Beloit, but at Craig and Parker, we have Sis and Bro, and it's where all the girls get together of any race if you want to come talk, just to have an open space. Same thing for males with Bro, and then there's, like, people of all races. There's people who are white, black, Mexican, Latina, Latino, anything from anywhere, and we all get along, and it's just a nice place to go if you just need to talk.
I would take it to the counselors, since they're ones who, I think, put kids into classes and just, instead of just putting them where they should be, maybe challenging them to enter classes. And also, we also could just spread the word and be like, that class isn't that hard, here's what was in it, the only challenge is you putting effort in. And just, if somebody hears, like, another person of color saying, just talking about the class, and we're not watering it down, but just letting them know what's in it and that it is, you're able to get through it, I feel like that's gonna help a lot of people to also move up in the classes and to get into more groups as well.
So, having spent some time with activists, how are you inspired to make the dream come true?
I'd say I'm inspired to make the dream come through just basically through my actions and future leadership. You need to just take action. You can't wait for somebody else to do it. And whenever you see action needs to be made, it needs to happen.
Also, be a voice for others. There are some that are scared to take some risk just because of their position that they're in. So please have the voice for them if they are too scared to speak out.
And also, what I noticed in the video is that it's everyday people. You don't have to have these extraordinary qualities to be the American hero. You can just work at Culver's and say something when somebody, call somebody out when they say something wrong, and that in itself is gonna hopefully have a domino effect on that person's actions in the future.
So, what can the older generation do best to support you, our youth, as change agents?
I personally think that people who, like, our parents and grandparents, they say that we do things and they're not so happy with what we choose to do, but then there's things where we'll explain what's going on and they won't understand exactly what we're talking about. So I feel that other people should join us to do things when we go out to do something. Like, if we say we're going somewhere
and it's just like a normal open place that they should come with us to experience what we experience. So then they don't see it from just a parent's point of view, they see it from their child's point of view.
I also feel that the older generation can talk to the younger generation like us because they have more wisdom than us. They've experienced more things than us, and they can let us know what's right from wrong. So.
I definitely see that the older generation does have a lot of more experience, and they're well seasoned in these issues that are still happening today, but they're happening in a different world, in a different social climate. So being able to understand that the way that you have to combat these problems is a little bit different than how they used to be.
Well seasoned? I guess we're well seasoned, huh?
I guess from both parties, just being able to listen, that's something I feel like our culture is really just letting go of, is you don't have to fire a comment, you can listen to the person and then respond after they're done talking. So if we, older generation, new generation, listen to each other's perspectives, and then also just we're open to what each other had to say, I feel like that definitely make stronger relationships between different generations.
Speaking of new generation, how can today's activists utilize social media for positive change?
With social media, you can easily use hashtags to spread a word, or post anything online. That post, it doesn't only go to 10 people. It can spread everywhere with just one share. So sharing, liking, and social media will help get the word out.
If you use social media responsibly and as a, I guess, gateway to get the information out, or whatever movement you have, it helps.
Exactly what those two said about like just sharing and making sure it gets to people, but also people in higher positions with more people knowing them. If you share these videos and these posts, then it will get to more people, and they'll see that the leaders in our society actually want this to change.
Social media, it's unavoidable in its use for young and old. My question is, how do you decipher what is real news versus what is fake news?
Since I've done some journalism in my school newspaper, I know that I have to look at the facts and different resources. You can't just go to one resource. You can't believe that after you see it one time. You should look it up, see if it's actually there. If you look it up and there's 1-2 articles about it, then maybe it's not true.
Yeah, I agree with what Ken said. Definitely do your research. If you see something, don't just put a rant on Facebook. Go check it out first, and then if you need to put a rant, then do so if that's how you want to handle that situation.
Another important piece is to, like what Ken said, to actually go out and do your research, because a lot of people just hear one person say it like by word of mouth, and they'll just assume that they're correct and they could have gotten something wrong. So you have to go and find all of the facts that have to go with it, and then make your own opinion based on what you find, because not everyone's going to think the same thing.
Is there a question in the audience?
How has your negative racist experience affected you and how you treat other people that's not the same color as you are?
I guess for me, I kind of experienced something like this week, sadly. But just to be the bigger person and not belittle people for the color of their skin, their background, or what have, like who they are. Just be accepting, be loving. If you have to voice your opinion, then do it respectfully, and just love, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and to add on to that, kill them with kindness. When they tell you something, keep it together, and then approach them respectfully. And well, for me, my main point of confronting them or anything is to educate them so they won't do it again. So yeah. Kill 'em
Matt?
with kindness.
Just knowing how it feels to be singled out or targeted specifically because of my race, just not reversing that and doing that to other people, so not assuming something of someone just because of their race.
Last question. You guys had an opportunity to talk with activists who spoke and ate with Dr. King, who marched during the civil rights era. You had a chance to do a lot of research. Just share with us how was that experience, not only the research, but just hearing from people who were actually there.
That was actually something that was really important to me because you go to class, like for all of us, we've had to take U.S. history at some point, and you go through and you do your African American unit, and they teach you everything that's in the book, that not all of it is necessarily true. So it's just based on whoever wrote the textbook that you were given, the opinion they had. Most of their opinion is in the book, and they try to like slide it in like discreetly. But if you actually pay attention and you look at it and you know what's going on and you do your research outside of class that's not required, you'll find out that a lot of the stuff that you might have learned in high school or middle school wasn't exactly how they said it.
Knowing that, having the experience of talking to them was very humbling, but it also put into perspective how hard they did work. It wasn't just a lady sat on a bus and some people walked down the street and then now black people could vote. Like, there was millions of people who worked hard, whether it was they directly marched or just within their own communities, just changing the way that they act and they looked at people. The movement was bigger than just Dr. King. It was a whole country, a whole nation that worked.
So like they were talking about the selective history. That's one thing I wanted to mention really quick, is that we really need to look at the full history. And like before I went down south to Memphis this last summer, I didn't know a lot of the history, like the lynchings that occurred and stuff like that. And that just really upset me. And I was like, why aren't we talking about this? And then another thing that I learned from David Feingold was that we talked about like the limits of the freedom of speech. And we talked about like the Confederate flag or the Confederate monuments. And so if we see those and we don't like them and we want them to be taken down, but it's protected with the freedom of speech, and what needs to happen is we need to talk to these people and say why this is offensive, why we want it down, and just have a conversation with them.
Excellent. Thank you. Outstanding project. You guys did a great job. How many of you dream? If you dream, raise your hand. How many of you dream for a better life for yourself? How many of you dream for a better life for your kids? Now picture this. Millions of people every day aspire to have equal justice, equal opportunities, and equal chance at greatness. Langston Hughes captured this in his poem, Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? There's a lot of imagery and simile in his poem. It's powerful. If you haven't had the chance, take an opportunity to just go back, take a look at it, and really try to decipher what was he actually trying to say about dreams. How have the dreams of groups of people been deferred? And for what reasons? We're going to move into our next segment with our award presentations. If representatives from UAW Local 95, if you would please come forward. They will be presenting the UAW Local 95 MLK Junior Civil Rights Service Award.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Silla, and I currently represent the UAW Local 95 as its current president. And last year, after the award ceremony, I was asked if I would elaborate a little bit more on the history of the UAW and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So with that, the United Auto Workers and the Civil Rights Movement has a very long history with each other. The UAW Pat Greathouse Center was purchased in 1949 in Ottawa, Illinois, which is about an hour and a half south of here, just west of Chicago, as we saw in the film. And it was purchased by the members of the UAW Region 4. The facility was purchased because our union was diverse with members of many races, and no one would rent us a space for mixed crowds. The UAW has always been in the forefront of social issues facing our country, including civil rights, workers' rights, and human rights, and the movements thereof. During the 1960s, UAW International President Walter Reuther was a major supporter of civil rights movement and close personal friends with Dr. Martin Luther King. The United Auto Workers supported King in many different ways, including housing the King Group at our national headquarters in Detroit, where King penned his "I Have a Dream" speech. Martin Luther King was a keynote speaker at the UAW's 25th anniversary of being in existence in 1963. Martin Luther King also used the Pat Greathouse Center as a safe place for his group to plan various events, marches held in the South. In 1965, UAW leadership, including Walter Reuther, marched together in Selma, Alabama with Dr. King. When a group of King supporters, including many children, were jailed in Mississippi for participating in a protest, the local judge refused to release them without a cash bail. The UAW flew down with financial resources that released each and every jailed protester. After Dr. King's untimely assassination, his widow, Coletta Scott King, and Walter Reuther marched in support of a peaceful resolution to the Memphis sanitary strike. Now, I know it was a long time ago, and a lot of you, but I remember it, and some of us elder ones do. But marched to resolve the strike, and the UAW delivered the largest outside monetary contribution of $50,000 to the strike fund. Back then, that was a lot of money. When Walter and May Reuther were killed in a 1970 plane crash, Coletta Scott King delivered the eulogy at the funeral. Yet today we still find ourselves fighting some of the same battles that were fought 50 years ago. But I feel celebrations like this one right here continue to give us hope for the future. And it makes me proud this particular event's origins began as a brainchild of the UAW Local 95. Dr. Martin Luther King and the United Auto Workers and the civil rights issues, along with workers' rights issues, human rights issues, have a long history of being intertwined with each other. As I believe we are codependents of each other. The lines, in my opinion, have never been clearer in my lifetime on these social issues. As consumers, look at labels, make wise decisions. It's up to all of us to support the companies and the organizations that support us. You know, we keep throwing money at these companies that are doing nothing but trying to divide us and take away benefits and take away rights, yet we keep supporting them. You know, the push for lower wages, for less benefits. You know, it's time we stand up to these issues and the causes you support. As in the legacies of Martin Luther King Jr. and Walter Reuther, we need to stand together against social injustices. And remember, every time an individual or organization's rights are deprived or depressed, and nobody rises to help, it is one more straw in the camel's back. We need to stand together. Remember, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, it is always the right time to do the right thing. So with that, let's go to the awards. Our first award, let's see. As founders of the commemoration of Dr. Martin Luther King, the UAW Local 95 has proudly granted the UAW Local 95 Service Award for more than a quarter century. Today, the UAW Local 95 is pleased to recognize two recipients who serve our communities in various ways. The first recipient is Mr. Lonnie Bingham. Lonnie was nominated by Santo Cafaro, member of the African American Liaison Committee. Mr. Bingham is the president of the African American Liaison Advisory Committee to the Janesville Police Department. Lonnie has led the charge to create dialogue, enhance mutual respect and trust, and establish a positive working relationship with the citizens of our community. He is passionate about making a difference. He has met with students at 3 middle schools and 2 high schools in Janesville to open clear lines of communication between citizens and the police department, which has led to many positive interactions. Lonnie also participates in the YWCA's program, You, Me, and Our Colorful Community, that is designed to help and promote racial justice. The UAW is pleased to present the Local 95 Service Award to Lonnie Bingham for his work in building sustainable relationships of goodwill and trust.
Whoa. Okay, this is a shock. All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you. I grew up listening to the elders always say that life runs in circles, you know. I was a student here a few years back, and now I'm up on the stage here receiving an award in Martin Luther King's name. I had an interesting journey. I met some interesting people here at Blackhawk Tech, and I just want to name a few that helped me during some troubled times, and also is one of the reasons why I'm still here today. Oh, excuse me, I'm a little nervous. One of them is Mark Brown, who was at the time Dean of Criminal Justice. The other one is an instructor by the name of Pat Lane, the illustrious Pat Lane, if you know anything about him in criminal justice. The other one is a psychology teacher, Cheryl Hasselvort, if I'm tearing up her name. And one most important person that helped me through a troubled time and is also responsible for me to be up here today and to do the work that I'm trying to do is Rubina Jan. Would you please stand up? Namaste. Okay, got that out the way. Again, Elders was teaching us about life running in circles. I'm from Chicago, and I'm now here in Janesville. I've been in Janesville 17 years. And as we saw in the video, 2 cities was mentioned that I'm part of, Chicago and Janesville. I was only 3 when Martin Luther King passed away. I am now 53. And again, I'm up here receiving an award in his name. Wow. My work with the African American liaison community is very important to me. I am an agent for change. I am trying to change the narrative on how policing is perceived in the minority community. I am trying to create a dialogue and trust for those people who have perceived notions of how policing affects our community. Again, about full circles, I was raised in the streets of Chicago. I didn't like police departments or police officers. I was raised by a police officer. I spent 20 years as a paralegal, and a handful of those years as a paralegal, I sued police departments and police officers. But when I came into Janesville, and last year, I wound up volunteering for the African American Liaison Advisory Committee to the Janesville Police Department. Wow. So now I'm advising police departments. I'm learning their training. And what floored me just last year was I was offered an opportunity, a privilege and an honor to sit on the oral interview board for hiring of police officers in Janesville, Wisconsin. Okay, you got a kid from Chicago, right? Running around, hating police. Now I'm hiring police. Now that's full circle. You know, I just want to say find a quote from Dr. King, and I will leave. I have a dream. I didn't want to be up here in the first place. I have a dream that one day, on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit together at the table of brotherhood. Now, my membership as part of the African American Liaison Committee is evident of that we are sitting at the table of brotherhood to discuss our issues. But there's another story I want to tell you. A few months back, we did a presentation at the committee on the meaning of racism. And that racism discussion went very well. But it was closed out by a very powerful moment that is directly affected to this quote right here. A young man in the committee walked up to me and said, "Lonnie, can I do something special to help close the conversation out?" I said, "Sure." He stepped to me and said, "Lonnie, I am a son of a slave owner." And he apologized. He and I shook hands and embraced, and that is what Dr. King's dream was all about. That gentleman here today is in the audience, Ray Jewell. Would you stand, please? So that quote is what I'm leaving you with today is the son of slaves and the son of slave owners can overcome. Thank you. I knew it.
With that, our next recipient is Dr. Jeffrey Lewis, who was nominated by, go ahead. Who was nominated by Dr. Allison Beyond, principal at the Craig High School in Janesville. Dr. Jeffrey Lewis has conducted community-based research and evaluation in urban schools and communities for more than 20 years. He and his colleagues developed Circles of Support, a school-based program that creates supportive spaces for African American boys that foster mutual support, positive school identities, and school engagement. In this work, he and his colleagues use capacity building approaches to help school staff, parents, community members, and others work together to improve social and educational outcomes of the boys. Dr. Lewis is also involved in cross-sector collaborations that involve working with grassroots, community change agents, human services, youth development specialists, schools, and various city services to address needs that the community itself identifies. His work has impacted communities in Rock County. The UAW Local 95 is pleased to present the Martin Luther King Jr. Service Award to Dr. Jeffrey Lewis.
So I wasn't really prepared to speak, but let me say a couple of words. Back in 2005, I had the opportunity to do some work with a group of African-American boys at McClinigan Elementary School in Beloit. And that group of boys literally changed my life. I went into that school with the charge of trying to understand why is it that our African-American boys are showing up in special education at rates that were a cause for concern. Why weren't their needs being met in regular education? And I did that work. But as a part of that work, as a part of trying to understand what was going on in our schools, in our communities that were resulting in these outcomes that were unfavorable to our boys, I got to know our boys in ways that I never imagined. I began asking them, like, who is it in your life that gives you support? And what amazed me about what the boys shared, and this is in a situation where I would, quite honestly, it was hostile. You know, the environment was hostile. The boys and their families were only seen in terms of their deficits and in terms of what were perceived as problems. And yet when we asked the boys, like, who are the people that support you? They named all kinds of people, including teachers who had no idea the impact that they were having on those students, in spite of the hostilities, the misunderstandings, and the kind of really psychological violence that I saw in that school. Each of our boys could tell stories, give clear examples of what it was that these teachers were doing, all of whom were white, that were helpful to them. And I can guarantee you not one of those teachers had any idea. The other things that the boys did is they began to describe for us the family members and the broad geography of that support. Our kids were in social families, right? They were in Beloit, they were in Rockford, they were in Milwaukee, they were in Danville. Their families that was their family space. It wasn't the apartment across the street. And so what I discovered and what we began to build on was that in spite of what everyone believes and in spite of how we talk about these kids, there's much more to the story, and there's much more possible. And while I think it's important to have dreams, it's also important to understand what we can do right now, what's right in our midst, but that because of how we think about it, because of our presumptions and assumptions, our ignorance, our segregation, we don't have access to what's immediately available to us that can make a big difference. And so the work in Beloit has grown substantially, so that we're in a lot of districts and a lot of places, but my heart is there in Beloit. But my heart's moved north to Janesville as well, because we moved the program there. First place we work with high school students. First with African-American boys. We're always brought in to work with boys. Nobody can work without boys for whatever reason, right? But it's more than that. And as we began to do this work, we understood we cannot help these boys or these students, frankly, be successful if we don't change the context, if we don't begin to help staff and the larger context change around them. But just as was true with our 5th grade African-American boys in McClinigan Elementary School back in 2005, 6, 7, when we were working down there, 2005 and 6, it's not something that we have to put off into the future. It's something that we're capable of right now. And what I've seen at Craig High School is they have developed a Circles of Support program and process and support for students of color that I could not have dreamed or imagined. It never occurred to me to do what they are doing. and to create the opportunities that they're creating, and to see the transformations not just of students, but of staff, and potentially, I think, of community as their program grows. And so they're helping. They're actually, in fact, I was sitting here with my colleague Jeremiah, listening to the young people speak here today, and I thought, you know what, we need to take some of their advice and go back to some of the places we have circles and figure out how do we invite the voices of elders into the conversation and into the co-creation of what it is we want to be as a community, not just as a school, but as a community, really as a democracy, right? You know, the schools are the heart of our common space. We embody and create the democracy we want to live in those public spaces, and schools are at the heart of that. So I can't say enough about what I've gotten from the folks here in Rock County, but particularly Beloit and Janesville, Craig. I'm at an age now, and I lived through a lot of the stuff you're talking about. I'm at an age now where often you begin to think about retirement, but I'm so energized by what I'm seeing emerge out of the creativity, out of the heart, out of the imagination, out of the hard work of the people that I work with. I can't imagine ever stopping, and I don't think I want to. So again, I thank each and every one of you for being here, for your commitment to celebrate this type of work and this way of being together. I want to thank Dr. Bian in particular, both for the nomination, but really for the collegiality and the friendship that we've been able to share, and the amazing work that her school is doing. And there are others here that I know, and I want to just acknowledge that all of you have played a role one way or the other in helping me be better at my work, and hopefully continue to make a difference in the lives of children.
And once again this year, thank you for allowing us from the UAW to participate in the celebration, and we'll see you again next year. Thank you.
Next, we will have a presentation given by Mrs. Angela Moore, who is the YWCA Executive Director, and she will be presenting the YWCA Racial Justice Award.
Thank you. Good evening. The YWCA Rock County Racial Justice Award recognizes an individual that actively strives to live the YWCA's mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. This person also embodies the principles of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This year, we're pleased to honor an individual that has demonstrated passion and leadership in working toward racial justice in our Rock County community. The recipient this year of the YWCA Racial Justice Award is Attorney Dorothy Harrell. Attorney Harrell's nominators, Dennis Baskin and Patricia McGee, wrote, "Attorney Dorothy Harrell is very deserving of this recognition. In fact, the title and purpose of this award represents the work she has been engaged in for over 40 years. Furthermore, it is important to note that her passion and commitment aligns with the goals of enacting social change, dismantling racism, and standing on the front lines in the struggle for peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Nearly her whole life, Dr. Harrell has been involved in these monumental efforts, but her most recent 3 years of exceptional work in the Rock County area is worthy of special recognition. 3 years ago, the NAACP Beloit branch suffered a leadership void, low morale, and a questionable financial reputation. Ms. Harrell was appointed branch president and has restored the confidence and respect the organization once held. She focused the organization on education, workforce, and criminal justice reform in this short time, and the organization has yielded some impressive results. In the field of education, she works closely with school districts in the area to address the academic achievement gaps between white and black students and ensures that schools have a fair representation of faculty and staff members of color employed. It is common knowledge that Ms. Harrell led the effort to encourage the School District of Beloit to improve their number of administrators of color. In 2013, there were only 5% of administrators of color. Today, that number is over 40%. What impressive results in just 3 short years. Ms. Harrell's collaborative approach and demand for equality played a key role in her success. She is very concerned about criminal justice, equality, and reform, and has led a strong effort to improve social outcomes for all in Rock County. She's held tough meetings with law enforcement leaders in Rock County to address these important issues. She has even taken time out of her busy schedule to help young people navigate the criminal court system, which is frightening for many of our people of color. These are just 2 instances where Attorney Harrell has made a significant difference in the lives of others, and this clearly shows her commitment to eliminating racism, her passion and action for social change, and being a bold leader in the area of racial justice. Because there are so many students here, I just wanted to magnify some of her accomplishments. They are a lot more numerous than this. Ms. Harrell was a Porter Scholar and Vice President of the Student Council at Beloit Memorial High School. She's a 1971 graduate of Northwestern and earned a master's degree in urban education from Antioch University, Philadelphia Center, where she also studied for her Montessori certification. She taught for almost 20 years at Merrill Elementary, Lincoln Junior High School, and McNeil, all in Beloit, both when it was an elementary school and a junior high school. After graduating from UW Law School, she worked for the National Education Association and its affiliates. After working at the University of the District of Columbia, the Maryland and Illinois Education Associations, and as a Director of Labor Relations for Milwaukee Area Technical College, Ms. Harrell returned to the D.C. area and worked for the executive staff of the National Education Association for almost 15 years before returning to Beloit. She is a transformational leader who has made a difference in our community. She is a mentor to our young people. She is what America stands for: hard work, determination, and character. She's admired and trusted by many in her community and her church. She is a drum major for justice and an advocate for those who need her voice to navigate the system. Please join me again in recognizing Dorothy Harrell's incredible efforts in moving our community closer to the goal of peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all.
Thank you all for coming this afternoon, and thank you to the YWCA and Angela Moore for that award. Those of us who came to Blackhawk Tech today on what was Prairie Avenue, started off as Prairie Avenue in Beloit, we came on the Dr. Martin Luther King Highway. I hope you noticed the sign when you came in. So we're still on the road trying to achieve his dream. In addition to the thanks that I have for the people who sponsor this event, I have to thank my family and I have to thank my church family. Both have been the biggest support to me and have provided me with the foundation that I needed to go forward in life. You only have so many opportunities, but my family helped me to take advantage of most of them, and my church family has done the same. I have been a member of New Zion Baptist Church for about 60 years, so that's a long, long time. I also want to let the youth in the room know that the NAACP does have a youth council. So if any of you are interested in being a part of the youth council, if you live in Rock County, you're eligible for membership, and it's $10 for a year. So please try to take advantage of that. I had 2 significant experiences that have helped me make a decision about the work that I would do. And one of them was that after I returned to Beloit, after graduating from the School of Education and Social Policy at Northwestern, after getting a master's degree and a Montessori certificate, I could not get hired in Beloit. It took an intervention for the school district to hire me. And even at that time, at 22 years old, I knew that was wrong. And so I kept my focus on education, and I continued to work in the area of education because of things like that that happened. And that is one of the reasons that the first group that I joined when I came back to Beloit was with Tasha Bell on the Grow Your Own initiative, which is a scholarship to encourage minority students to return to Beloit and teach. It's an important endeavor. The other thing that happened to me is when I did return to Beloit to live, I was at home. There was a shooting in Beloit. A young man named Darius Baptiste, whom I did not know and had never met and still don't know anything about him, was shot downtown Beloit in front of the First National Bank in broad daylight. And I sat around and I lamented that no one was doing anything. No one was saying anything. When is someone going to say something about this young man's death? Who's going to ask a question? And finally, it came to me, why not you? Why can't you ask the question? Why can't you say something? I've been a lifetime member of the NAACP for 30, 40 years. So I decided I would get active in the branch again here, and that's what got me started back active with the NAACP. Not because you need to always be confrontational or argumentative, but because you need to ask the question at least. There's an answer, but you're not going to get it sometimes unless you ask the question. So I encourage each of you to ask the question. And our program is called A Dream Deferred. And I want you to think about that title, because maybe that dream was deferred because it's waiting for you. It may be waiting for you to act. It may be waiting for you to do something, the right thing. I have a mantra, and my mantra is pray for peace and fight for justice. Thank you.